when my HOA President Karen's shrill voice sliced through the perfectly manicured driveway of 123 Oak Lane, demanding I hand over the keys to my family's home in Willow Creek Estates. She had no idea I'd signed the papers selling the entire property just hours earlier. Her face, Botoxed into permanent disapproval, twisted into that signature Karen rage, the kind that only appears when someone dares question her little fiefdom. The scent of her overpriced vanilla coconut air freshener, HOA-approved scent only, of course, mixed with the faint chemical tang drifting from the community retention pond she swore was pristine. 20 years of being treated like the neighborhood crazy for daring to plant native wildflowers instead of the mandatory Kentucky bluegrass had led to this moment. My hand stayed steady as I reached into my purse. Not for the keys she wanted, but for the notarized contract that would burn her empire of fines and falsified reports to the ground. My name is Sarah Thompson, and at 26, I never imagined I'd be standing in the driveway of the house my father helped build, facing down the woman who'd made it her mission to break me after Dad died. Karen Hargrove loomed in her pastel power suit, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Behind her, the board members, her nephew Mark and niece Diane, watched from the sidewalk, their expressions a mix of smug and nervous. The HOA flag on her porch fluttered mockingly in the breeze. "Keys, Sarah. Now." Her voice was honeyed poison, the same tone she used at board meetings to declare someone's mailbox non-compliant. "We need to secure the property properly for the community's protection." Community protection. The phrase might have fooled me once back when I still believed in neighborly goodwill and shared covenants. But that was before I learned what protection really meant in Willow Creek. Selective enforcement, secret slush funds, and toxic runoff that had 3 families on my street quietly battling mysterious illnesses while Karen bragged about her award-winning landscaping. "I don't have them on me," I said, technically true. They were upstairs in Dad's old study, tucked behind the safe. Not that it mattered anymore. Diane finally spoke, her voice dripping false concern like cheap syrup. "Sarah, honey, we're only thinking of what's best. You've been under so much stress since graduation. Maybe managing this house is just too much for you right now." I cut her off with a smile. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own property." I noted the quick glance she shot Mark. The front door of Karen's McMansion opened and Aunt Margaret appeared, pearls gleaming, phone still in hand from the suspicious calls I'd overheard all morning. "Karen, the attorneys are here. They're waiting in the sunroom." Attorneys? On a Sunday? Karen's smile turned predatory. Perfect timing. Sarah was just about to discuss the future of her father's home with us. "Weren't you, dear?" The trap was so obvious it was almost funny, if it hadn't been terrifying. They'd orchestrated this ambush perfectly. Surprise visit, lawyers ready, board members blocking every polite exit. 3 months ago, I might have panicked. 3 months ago, I didn't know about the forged inspection reports, the bribed county officials, or the retention pond chemicals that had poisoned half the neighborhood while they lived in pristine, rule-compliant luxury. "Of course," I said, letting a small smile play on my lips. "But shouldn't we wait for my attorney? I called her when I saw your caravan pull up. She should be here any minute." Karen's jaw tightened so hard I heard the click. "You don't need outside counsel for a simple neighborhood discussion." "Is that what this is?" I gestured toward the sunroom, where briefcases lay open like invading armies on my father's old oak table. "A discussion?" Mark stepped forward, trying the good cop routine. "Come on, Sarah. We've all been patient with your little eco-activist phase. The native plants, the complaints about the pond, the petitions. But jeopardizing community standards over some misguided principles? Your father would be ashamed." The mention of Dad made my blood burn, but I kept my face neutral. They had no right to invoke his memory while planning to destroy everything he actually cared about. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket, a signal that contracts were already filed, that their little kingdom built on lies and chemical sludge was about to face its reckoning. "You're right," I said quietly. "Dad would be ashamed, but not of me." The tension in the driveway was thick enough to choke on. Through the perfectly trimmed hedges, I could see the community pond my mother had fought to keep natural before she passed. The oak tree where Dad pushed me on the swing. The gazebo where he taught me that a home meant responsibility, not control. This house held my entire childhood. Every birthday, every summer barbecue, every moment before cancer took him and left me alone with these vultures. Sometimes, to save a neighborhood soul, you have to burn the rule book. Shall we go inside then? Karen asked, her manicured hand reaching for my elbow to guide, or drag, me toward the waiting lawyers. I stepped back just out of reach. Actually, I need to get something from my room first. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Sarah, Karen warned, nostrils flaring. Unless you plan to physically restrain me? I met her eyes directly, daring her to show the monster behind the smile. She released a breath through her nose. 5 minutes. Mark, go with her. I climbed the front steps with Mark trailing behind like a prison guard. My fingers trailed along the banister I'd slid down as a child, before I learned that community standards could be both a blessing and a curse, before I understood that neighbors could be your greatest enemy. In 5 minutes, they'd learn what I'd done. In 5 minutes, their perfect little world would shatter. But first, I had one last card to play. Growing up in Willow Creek Estates meant growing up inside a museum of ridiculous rules. The neighborhood had been planned by my father and a handful of visionaries 25 years ago, each new covenant adding another layer of prestige and another skeleton to the HOA closet. I was 8 when Dad first walked me through the retention pond site, pointing at the future community and saying, "One day, Sarah, you'll help keep this place honest." He died when I was 16, before he could see how differently the rest of them would interpret that promise. The Willow Creek fortune, well, the dues-funded lifestyle, began with Dad's original designs and exploded under Karen Hargrove's reign. By the time I was born, we weren't just homeowners. We were legacy residents. Our name on the welcome sign. Our presence expected at every potluck and holiday lighting ceremony. But I was always the odd one out. While Mark and Diane followed the HOA-approved path, business degrees, strategic marriages to other rule followers, I studied environmental science. My rebellion started small, refusing to replace my wildflower garden with a mandatory sod, asking uncomfortable questions about the pond's chemical levels at annual meetings, interning with the county EPA instead of the HOA landscaping committee. "Your little activist phase will pass," Aunt Margaret would say, patting my hand with condescending pearls. "We all have our idealistic 20s. Dad was different." He'd pull me aside after those meetings, speaking quietly in his study. "Question everything, Sarah, even the covenants, especially the covenants." He started teaching me the real books, not the glossy ones Karen presented. "Someone needs to keep this place honest," he'd say, though I didn't understand the wait until after he was gone. The cancer took him fast, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. I was too deep in grief to notice the documents being shuffled, the secret board meetings held without me, the way Karen seamlessly stepped into the role of neighborhood dictator. It wasn't until I turned 18 and gained full ownership of the house that I learned about Dad's special clause in the original covenants. He'd left me something more valuable than equity, a 25% voting block in any major HOA decision, fully transferable upon graduation. But there were conditions. If I was deemed incapable or acting against community interests, the clause would revert to the board controlled by Karen. The first warning came my junior year. I joined a protest against the county's approval of Karen's new beautification project, cheap fertilizers dumped into the retention pond that would eventually leach into groundwater. I didn't know Karen herself had pushed the contract until her face appeared on the local news, calling protesters entitled children who don't understand progress. When I came home for Thanksgiving, the intervention was waiting. "You're embarrassing the neighborhood," Diane hissed, her HOA-approved engagement ring flashing. "You're jeopardizing everything we built." Mark added his corporate speak MBA wisdom. Karen was blunter. "Your father left you that voting power because he believed you'd honor the legacy. If you can't, perhaps we need to revisit whether you're capable." The threat was clear. but I was still naive enough to think neighbors meant something. I learned otherwise when I discovered the Pondview file. It happened by accident. Home, for spring break, looking for a phone charger in Karen's home office. A stack of folders tipped over. 2 versions of the same inspection report spilled out. One stamped draft detailed dangerous chemical levels, algal blooms, and links to 3 local cancer cases. The other stamped final showed nothing but sparkling blue water and happy fish. My hands shook as I photographed every page. This wasn't just lazy maintenance. This was criminal fraud that would sicken families while Karen bragged about her award-winning pond on the HOA website. When I confronted her privately, hoping for a neighborly fix, her response froze my blood. Your father knew how the game was played, Sarah. He just got soft toward the end. Cancer affected his judgment. Don't make the same mistake. That's when I knew Dad hadn't gotten soft. He got honest. And it had probably killed him faster than the disease. The board closed ranks after that. Suddenly, I wasn't invited to meetings. My voting rights were under review. They started documenting my erratic behavior, my garden, my complaints, my grief, even my choice to date a guy who drove a non-HOA-approved electric car, as evidence of poor judgment. They were building a case to trigger Dad's clause and strip me of power. Every block party became a performance where they played concerned neighbors while secretly recording me, hoping to catch a meltdown they could use. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was alone. Dad had left me more than a house. He'd left allies, old residents who remembered when Willow Creek had integrity, and one especially important contact, Robert Brennan, his former partner who'd quit the board rather than sign Karen's shady contracts. Your father was gathering evidence, Robert told me over coffee 6 months ago. He was going to clean house, but the cancer got him first. He always said if anything happened to him, you'd finish what he started. Now, standing in my childhood bedroom with Mark watching from the doorway, I thought about Dad's last words. The house is in the neighborhood, Sarah. Don't let them convince you otherwise. At the time, drugged with pain meds, I'd thought he was confused. Now I understood perfectly. The trap revealed itself in pieces. It started 3 weeks after my graduation. Karen's sudden sweetness should have been my warning. She called personally to congratulate me. Diane sent HOA-approved white roses. Mark texted about putting the past behind us. Aunt Margaret invited me to the annual community summit at Karen's estate. 30 acres of pristine land where generations of rule followers celebrated with wine and self-congratulation. It felt like an olive branch. Robert convinced me to go. You need to know what they're planning. He slid me Grace Winter's card, the best real estate attorney in the county. Grace cut through the legalese. There's a competency clause in your father's covenant addendum. But there's also a sunset provision. Once you've held the property 6 months post-graduation, the clause expires and your voting power becomes irrevocable. They're running out of time. The summit started beautifully. Lobster rolls on the deck, sailing the community boat, croquet on the lawn like old times. If I hadn't been watching, I might have missed the performance. They steered every conversation toward my stress, my exhaustion, my need for neighborhood support. The documents appeared Saturday evening after enough wine. Just a formality, Karen said, sliding the papers across the table. Restructuring the covenants for tax purposes. Everyone's signing. I picked up the stack. The first pages were boring legalese. Buried on page 12, in a section titled Voluntary Asset Reallocation, was the real poison. I would sign away my voting rights in exchange for a generous lifetime community stipend of $50,000 a year, pocket change compared to the millions the neighborhood properties were worth. I'll need my lawyer to review this, I said calmly. The temperature dropped. Diane's laugh was sharp. Sarah, we're neighbors. This is what's best for everyone, including you. Do you really want the burden of managing a property you clearly don't understand? Properties I don't understand? I set my wine down. You mean like the retention pond with the falsified inspection reports? Silence. Karen's face went purple. You ungrateful little. Aunt Margaret's warning cut her off. Mark tried to salvage. Sometimes in neighborhood management, we have to make difficult decisions. Difficult decisions? Is that what we're calling poisoning families now? The gloves came off. You think you're so righteous? Diane spat, playing the eco-warrior while living off dues that built this whole place. You're a hypocrite. At least I'm trying to change things, I shot back. What have you ever done except marry well and spend everyone else's money? Karen stood, chair scraping. Enough. Sign the papers and remain part of this community with a comfortable stipend, or refuse and find out how alone you really are. What does that mean? Her smile was ice. Certain behaviors can indicate instability. Paranoid delusions about neighbors. Refusing reasonable community decisions. We have 3 psychologists ready to testify about your concerning patterns. My blood ran cold. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? We have security footage of you trespassing in my office, witnesses to your erratic accusations, documentation of your extremist environmental ties, even your college therapist notes about grief-related anxiety. Money opens many doors, Sarah. I understood then. This wasn't just about stripping my vote. It was about destroying my credibility so no one would believe what I knew about the pond. You have 24 hours, Karen said, gathering the unsigned papers. Sign, or we file for a neighborhood conservatorship Monday morning. With our resources and your documented history, which judge do you think they'll believe? That night, I lay in my childhood bed at Karen's estate, staring at the ceiling Dad had painted with glow-in-the-dark stars when I was 5. Through the walls, I heard them discussing me like a problem to solve. The psychologist said grief-induced paranoid disorder would be easiest, Aunt Margaret whispered. We'll move her assets immediately once we have control. They were so confident. They had no idea every word was being recorded on the phone in my pocket, that Grace was preparing injunctions, that Robert had copies of every document I'd found. They thought they were closing a trap. They were walking into mine. The night everything changed started with a fake migraine. I need some air, I said after dinner, pressing fingers to my temples. The stress is getting to me. Karen actually smiled, thinking I was cracking. Take your time, Sarah. Think about what's best for the community. I walked to the gazebo, the only spot with clear cell signal. Grace answered on the first ring. Did you get it? Every word, I said, sending the recording of their conservatorship planning. That's conspiracy to commit fraud and false imprisonment, she replied. But Sarah, we need more. We need them discussing the actual pawn crimes. I knew I was going back in. They were on their 3rd bottle. If I could steer the conversation. I circled to Karen's study window. Voices drifted out. We need to accelerate the new fertilizer contract before she interferes, Karen was saying. Mark protested. The soil samples showed contamination. Just like last time, get new samples that show something different. Harrison at the testing firm owes us. What if the EPA sniffs around after those kids got sick? Diane laughed. Please. Do you know how much we donated to the county supervisor's campaign? One call, and any investigation disappears. Aunt Margaret worried. James was getting suspicious before he died. Karen's tone sharpened. James got weak. All that guilt about doing the right thing. He was going to destroy everything with his sudden conscience. The cancer was convenient. He gave up. Couldn't live with turning us in. My heart stopped. Dad hadn't just died of cancer. They'd broken his spirit first. I crept back, hands shaking with rage. They hadn't just stolen my vote. They'd stolen Dad's last months. They'd poisoned the neighborhood and now planned to lock me away like some suburban madwoman. But they'd given me 24 hours. I slipped back inside, grabbed water with shaking hands. Diane found me. Sarah, you look pale. Just overwhelmed, I said. I think I need help. Her eyes lit with victory. She hugged me like a snake. Admitting it is the first step. I let her lead me back. Let them see defeated shoulders, trembling hands. Can I go home tonight? Come back tomorrow with my decision. Karen nodded, satisfied. Be back by noon. Paper signed, or we proceed. They thought they'd released a broken bird to cage herself. They'd just given me 12 hours to burn their empire down. I drove away at 9:47 p.m., phone buzzing with Grace and Robert. In my pocket was the recording that would destroy them. Conspiracy, fraud, admission they'd driven my father to his death. But I wanted more than destruction. I wanted justice for every family breathing their chemicals. The 12 hours felt like war. I went straight to Grace's office. Evidence spread across the table. Bank statements, wire transfers, Dad's handwritten note, follow the money. Offshore accounts, bribes to inspectors, even county health officials. Federal-level fraud. Grace's face hardened. This is criminal conspiracy. But Sarah, if we use this, the whole HOA collapses. Those families deserve to live without poison, I said. And they deserve to know. We worked through the night. Grace drafted documents. Not surrender, but devastation. Robert contacted EPA and County DA. I did the hardest part. Called Harrison Pike, the developer who'd been circling Willow Creek for years, known for cleaning contaminated sites. By 3 a.m., we had a deal. Pike would buy my house and force a full HOA asset sale under the bylaws clause Dad had secretly added. Any shareholder, me, with over 20% voting power could trigger an immediate sale if criminal investigation hit senior board members. Karen had accidentally given me the nuclear option. At dawn, I stood in Dad's study wearing Mom's pearls and a simple black dress. Exactly what they expected, a broken young woman coming to surrender. Grace would file criminal complaints at 11:45. EPA at 11:50. Pike's offer at 11:55. At noon, I would give Karen exactly what she wanted, just not the paper she expected. The drive back felt like a countdown. 10 miles, Grace finalizing. 5 miles, agents reviewing evidence. 1 mile, my life about to change. I pulled in at 11:58. Karen waited on the porch, victory glowing. I knew you'd make the right choice, Sarah. I have, I said, briefcase in hand. I've thought about everything you said, about community, responsibility, knowing my place. Inside, the board was assembled like a tribunal. Champagne already poured. Karen snapped the documents. Now, I open my briefcase slowly. Before I sign anything, you need to sign something first. Her face darkened. It's just a simple acknowledgement, I said, voice steady, that you've received formal notice of the criminal complaint filed with the county DA this morning, fraud, bribery, conspiracy related to the retention pond. The room exploded. Diane lunged. Mark shouted for lawyers. Aunt Margaret went white. Karen went very, very still. You stupid little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said, checking my watch. 12:01. I've exercised my voting rights under Section 15.3 of the original covenants. In the event of criminal investigation, I'm forcing an immediate sale of all HOA-managed assets. The buyer is already under contract, Harrison Pike. You can't. I can. 25% voting power. Remember the clause you were so desperate to steal? I pulled out the second set. Oh, and that conservatorship you planned? Grace Winters has a restraining order keeping you all 500 feet away. The psychologist you bribed has been reported to the medical board. My phone buzzed. County agents entering HOA headquarters now. They're raiding the offices. Karen's face drained to gray. The neighborhood, you're destroying everything. No, I said, thinking of Dad's words. I'm selling buildings, but I'm saving what matters. The residents will keep their homes. The families you poison get restitution. And the Willow Creek name might actually mean something good again. You're not part of this community anymore, she spat. You're a traitor. I'm my father's daughter, I replied. And it turns out he left me more than a house. He left me the tools to stop you. I turned to leave, but paused. One more thing. The 3 cancer cases you covered up, 63 families are filing a class action. Pike's agreement includes a medical fund paid from your personal assets once you're convicted. The last sound I heard was Karen's wine glass shattering against the wall. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at my house. A desperate attempt by Karen to regain control. The DA raid had frozen accounts, but no arrests yet. She still thought she could negotiate. She had no idea I'd already signed the final sale papers that morning. I arrived early, walking through the house one last time. Every portrait seemed to watch me. I stopped at Dad's photo. His eyes held both sadness and approval. Mark intercepted me in the hallway, panic in his eyes. We need to talk. I have 2 kids. My wife is pregnant. If this goes public, you should have thought about that before falsifying reports. I was following orders. You have an MBA. You knew exactly what you were doing. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the board. Harrison Pike arrived with his team and Robert Brennan. Karen stormed in minutes later, saw Pike, and went volcanic. Get out of my neighborhood. Actually, Pike said mildly, as of 9 a.m. This morning, it's my neighborhood. Or it'll be once the title transfers Monday. The explosion never came. Instead, Karen turned to me with calculated coldness. You think you've won, but you've just destroyed yourself. No one in this county will speak to you. You'll be a pariah. I'll be honest, I countered. Diane and Margaret arrived looking haggard. We assembled in the living room. Pike's lawyer spread documents. The purchase price is $60 million for the entire HOA portfolio. However, that's contingent on full cooperation with environmental cleanup. $60 million? Karen laughed bitterly. The portfolio is worth $300. Was worth that, Pike corrected. Before the DA found contamination at 12 sites, before accounts were frozen, before word got out that Willow Creek HOA is under criminal investigation. I added, Pike has agreed to establish a $50 million remediation fund paid from sale proceeds. Every affected family gets health care and land cleanup. That's our money, Diane shrieked. Robert spoke quietly. It's money that should have been spent on proper maintenance in the first place. James knew that. Karen accused him of betrayal. Pike's lawyer cleared his throat. 2 options. Cooperate and keep personal assets not frozen. Or we pursue full civil damages against every board member personally. That's extortion, Margaret gasped. That's business, Pike replied. The same kind you practiced for 20 years. I watched them crumble. Mark broke first. I'll cooperate. Full disclosure. Karen snarled at him. I'm a father, Mark shot back. Something you never understood. Diane met my eyes for a moment. Something almost human. I'll sign too. That left Karen and Margaret. Margaret spoke first. It's over, Karen. We lost when James started documenting. Sign the papers. Karen's hands trembled with rage. 40 years I built this neighborhood. 40 years of hard choices none of you had the stomach for. Hard choices. I faced her directly. You mean like dumping toxic chemicals near playgrounds? Bribing officials to ignore cancer cases? Driving my father to give up on life? Those weren't hard choices, Karen. They were evil ones. For a second I thought she might strike me. Then she deflated. Give me the papers. One by one they signed. With each signature, the corrupt empire my father had dreamed of and Karen had poisoned officially ended. Pike pulled me aside afterward. Your father will be proud. James was a good man who got lost. You helped him find his way back. Karen heard and laughed bitterly. Proud? She destroyed everything he built. No, I said, looking at her for the last time. I destroyed everything you built. What my father built, integrity, responsibility, care for neighbors. That's what I'm rebuilding. 6 months later, I stood in the same driveway where Karen had demanded my keys. Everything had changed. The house was no longer mine. Pike had converted the entire neighborhood into the Willow Creek Center for Environmental Justice, an irony Dad would have loved. I was there for the opening, watching families from the affected blocks tour the rooms where the board once plotted. Karen was under house arrest awaiting trial on 37 criminal charges. The judge denied bail after learning she'd researched non-extradition countries. Diane fled to Florida, claiming ignorance, undermined by her signatures. Mark took a plea deal, 2 years minimum security. Aunt Margaret became the DA's star witness and kept her freedom, perhaps finding a piece of her soul. A woman named Mrs. Chun, whose son had leukemia from a pond, handed me a small oak sapling. This is from all of us. For what you did. I didn't sacrifice anything that mattered, I said, accepting the plant. Just things that were already poisoned. At the podium, Pike announced the $50 million health fund. And he gestured to me. I spoke from the heart. My father once told me houses aren't neighborhoods and rules aren't legacies. Our true legacy is the impact we have on each other. For too long, Willow Creek stood for harm disguised as perfection. Today we begin writing a different story. Afterward, I walked through the county park, carrying Dad's letter in my pocket. I'd lost the house, the inheritance, my place in the old neighborhood. The country club set had closed ranks. But I'd gained peace. My phone rang. A journalist in the next county investigating similar HOAs. We could use your help. I smiled. Send me the details. The Willow Creek empire was gone, but Sarah Thompson was just getting started. Karen had been wrong about one thing. She said I'd be alone. I wasn't. I had the respect of people who mattered, the gratitude of families I'd helped save, and the ability to look in the mirror without flinching. Standing where Dad's desk once sat, I could almost hear his voice. The house isn't the neighborhood, Sarah. I know, Dad, I whispered. I finally know. Outside, the county glittered under clean evening light. New environmental banners replaced old HOA signs. It was an ending, but also a beginning. I opened my laptop and began typing my testimony for Karen's trial. Each word was a brick in the new foundation I was building. Not an empire of rules, but a legacy of truth. The last line would be simple. My name is Sarah Thompson. My neighborhood built an empire on lies. I tore it down with the truth, and I'd do it again. Because sometimes to save your soul, you have to destroy everything else. And sometimes that's not a loss. It's a liberation. Thank you for listening to this HOA Karen story of betrayal and justice. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop in the comments. If this resonated, subscribe and share. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Your stories make these videos alive. Until next time, remember the hardest battles are with the neighbors next door, but truth always wins.